The U.S. Secret Service is defending itself against allegations it deleted text messages from before and during the January 6th insurrection.
And those messages were allegedly deleted shortly after they were requested by the DHS Inspector General as part of an investigation into the agency's response to the assault.
CBS News obtained a letter from the Inspector General that says the messages were wiped as, quote, part of a device replacement program. It goes on to say the U.S. Secret Service erased those messages after OIG requested records of electronic communication from the USSS as part of our evaluation of the events at the Capitol on January 6th.
And right now, let's bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane for more on this. Hey, Scott.
Hey, Charlie and Tanya, here's the bottom line. These are potentially important text messages from what is clearly an important moment in time, January 5th and January 6th, 2021, and we have learned unambiguously, the U.S. Secret Service were major players here at the Capitol on January 6th. First of all, because they actually were here. They had a protectee who was in harm's way, former Vice President Mike Pence. And you'll recall they had to usher Mike Pence out of the U.S. Senate chamber to an underground loading dock where he was kept safe through the balance of the afternoon and the evening. And they were big players at the White House, where they were protecting former President Trump. First at that White House ellipse speech, then later, according to testimony before this committee, in one of the White House presidential vehicles, where, according to testimony before the committee, they had to dissuade former President Trump from coming to the Capitol as the mob was here. The Secret Service messages are particularly important to the January 6th committee, but they don't fully exist, according to this letter from the Inspector General of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Now, timing is important here. What the Inspector General is saying is that the messages were deleted after they were requested by the internal inspectors and internal auditors. In response, the Secret Service says they had a resetting of phones that had been ordered before the Inspector General requested the messages, so they began the deletion process, or at least the resetting process, before the request was made. But either way, Tanya and Charlie, it's another cycle of controversial news involving the U.S. Secret Service just days after their director retired.
Absolutely. And so how, Scott, is Congress responding to all of this? Are they accepting it on face value?
We expect they'll get briefings about what happened, either from the Inspector General of the Department of Homeland Security and or the Secret Service itself. We'll hear from members of the January 6th committee over the weekend ahead of their next hearing, which focuses on dereliction of duty, they allege, against former President Trump. But we are already hearing from the chairman of the relevant committees, the chairs of the committees that have oversight over Secret Service. The chair of the Senate Government Affairs and Homeland Security Committee, Gary Peters of Michigan, said we need to get to the bottom of whether the Secret Service destroyed federal records. The chair of the House Homeland Security Committee, who also is the chairman of the January 6th committee, Congressman Benny Thompson of Mississippi, said the committee will be briefed about what he calls a, quote, extraordinarily troubling destruction of records. And he says their committee will respond accordingly. Congress will get involved now with reviewing the review of the Inspector General and what happened to those messages from the Secret Service.
And Scott, I want to shift gears a little bit. Peter Navarro, he's back in court today. He was offered a plea deal. What happens next?
Now, Charlie, he rejected that plea deal. You'll recall Peter Navarro was a trade advisor for former President Trump. He has snubbed this January 6th committee. He has defied the subpoena and the document requests. So he is one of two former Trump world figures being criminally prosecuted for contempt of Congress. The other one is Steve Bannon. He goes on trial Monday morning. Peter Navarro is set to go on trial in late November, CBS News has learned. He was offered a plea deal, according to prosecutors, to plead guilty to one of two federal contempt of Congress charges. He has rejected that plea deal, so the trial will move forward. Two people now charged with defying the January 6th committee, both of them in court amid the January 6th committee hearings.
All right. Well, Scott MacFarlane on Capitol Hill, thank you so much. I'm sure we will be hearing more from you on this soon. Thanks for that.
Thank you both.